Mary Oliver, in her poem Song of Autumn, notes, "Don't you think that the leaves dream now of the comfort of the ground after all that time experiencing the nothingness of air?" Even in this paraphrase, we recognize something of the power and impact of grief on our lives. We're living through a time in a pandemic age where many of us all around the world have difficulty acknowledging the impact of grief every day on our lives, on our families, on our communities, and in our societies. And yet, religious traditions, spiritual pathways, indigenous wisdom, and a personal habitus for how we live our daily lives gives us comfort. We ask that this time, in the arc of this year, as we acknowledge grief, we recognize that we don't experience grief alone. We don't have to go through the experience of grief alone. And there is, in fact, across the arc of these religious traditions, something akin to this classic term from the Greek tradition called koinonia, which at its root implies a deeper sense of community, of fellowship, or of being. Which is to say, even though we may experience grief and acknowledge it every day, we recognize that in our being, we are meant to be sinewed together as a species, to share these experiences in a way that we never feel isolated or abandoned. Because your grief and my grief in this time in a pandemic age, however unequal, however unevenly distributed, is still taking place in this century, in this year, in this month and week and day, and in this moment. It's our shared spiritual practice in this moment to acknowledge grief and to pause to do that together. Amen.